Greetings, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our podcast aims to provide distinctive perspectives and concepts for building leadership capacity to meet the challenges of a volatile and uncertain future. I am Dr. John Dentico, your host. If you are keenly interested in the logic for hiring from within, the cost of turnover, and the absolute need for employee development, then I am confident that my conversation with Mr. Tom Applegarth, VP of Human Resources for Preferred CFO, will be informative and worth your time. So let's get started. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. And welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Dentico. I'm very pleased and honored today to have as a guest Mr. Tom Applegarth. Tom is a 30-year veteran in the human resources industry with experience spanning manufacturing plants, retail stores, and divisions of Fortune 500 companies. Tom has HR experience across the United States, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. His experience has brought significant measurable improvements in employee engagement, attrition reduction, recruitment of the best and brightest employees, and establishment of high-impact processes and improvements. Tom has experience serving as high-profile companies such as Amoco, Goodyear Tires, and Belden. Tom currently works for Preferred CFO as the VP of Human Resources. Preferred CFO provides finance, accounting, HR, and payroll services for small companies. I am very pleased to have him with me today. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you, John?
I'm doing just fine. Let's kick it off, Tom. Let's get down to business, as I like to say. So let me ask you a question. You read so much today about the fact that we have all these tech layoffs going on right now, yet we're in the middle of a talent war. It almost seems in some regard counterintuitive. And there are so many different things now in the wake of the COVID pandemic that has changed. Tom, let me start off and ask you this simple question. As you look across the landscape of human resources today, what would you say employees are looking for in an organization choose to join?
I think they're looking for a company that they can identify with the mission and the vision and the values of that company and really feel connected. And then I always say that people often go to work not only for companies, but for managers. And having that relationship with a manager can be critical to retaining and attracting the best talent.
Yeah, I would agree. There's that old saying, Tom, people don't leave companies, they leave their manager. I'm sure you've heard that probably
Absolutely.
600,000 times.
Yes.
Tom, if you're hiring people into your company, what are you going to tell them that's going to interest them? And more than that, not only about the hiring, but how do you keep them? How do you retain them in that organization?
Sure, absolutely. I think you have to really paint the vision of where the company's going and help people be optimistic about the path that the company is on and how it's going to grow and thrive and really its competitive advantage in the marketplace. So I think you have to help people understand the vision of the company. And then you have to talk about their role in the company. What do they want their role to be? How can it evolve over time? And how can we make sure as an organization that we're giving them the type of role and challenges that they're looking for? And then again, that personal relationship with the manager is key in attracting the employee. Manager needs to be in selection mode, but once they are certain that this is the person that they want, or even during the process, they need to be in selling mode and they need to develop that connection with the employee and help that employee know how the manager is going to help develop them and give them what they're looking for in their next role.
You know, I spend a lot of time talking about mutual trust, the importance of trust. Why don't you give me some comments, some ideas on how important mutual trust or trust is in an organization between, let's say, the manager and the employee?
Oh, it's absolutely key. It's absolutely key. A manager isn't going to work with somebody long if they can't trust their employee. And likewise, an employee is going to be looking for another role if they don't feel like they can trust their manager. That trust in an organization and trust in people that you work with is absolutely key.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's so very important. Ever since my first career as a naval officer, I learned how important trust is, that the whole organization runs on trust. It's the fuel, if you will, that runs an organization. If you don't have it, you have no relationship. You really don't have anything else. Tom, I want to make a statement, and I'd like to hear your comments about this particular statement. Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have for a good portion of my work now, I would say more than just drifted away. I've made a significant movement away from the term follower to a term much more collaborative in nature, collaborators, and partners. As seeing followers almost in a pejorative sense. Tell me, what do you think about that?
No, I would agree with that. I think managers need to partner with the people that they work with, that are their peers, that are people that are working directly for them. And it really is a partnership. And especially if you want to have the best and the brightest working for you, they want to be involved. They want to understand why they're doing what they're doing. They want to be involved in identifying the strategy on how we're going to accomplish certain goals. They want to make sure they understand very clearly what are the goals, how are we going to measure success, how do we tell when we're winning, and that is a very collaborative environment. Managers that think they can just walk out and tell their team what to do are usually not very successful. Usually have high level of turnover and aren't really the teams that are exceeding expectations and attaining goals that everybody thought, were not possible.
It's interesting. Let me follow up with that just for a second. I'm curious to know what your opinion is on this. I have been reading a number of different things that obviously comes across my desk every day. Can't hardly keep up with it half the time. And a lot of it, this has been a position of mine anyway, is the importance of the employee or worker, however we want to say it, being involved in the decision making processes of the organization itself. The fact that they're not just not just providing input per se, but actually, if you will, involved in the decision making and eventually the outcomes of what that organization is doing. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's what most employees want. And certainly the types of employees that most organizations want that are going to really take on projects, get results. Those employees want to be involved in the entire process and they want to make decisions and they want accountability. And those are the types of employees that you want. Employees that shy away from accountability are probably not always the best fit in a role that's going to have a major impact on your business. And definitely younger generation is even more in that mindset than maybe people that entered the workplace 20 or 30 years ago. And you really need to have that participative management style. You need to involve employees in making decisions and making the business plans, or they're not going to be happy and they're going to start looking for an organization that gives them that.
I agree. I agree. I think they're looking to be part of their own future. I have a saying where I say, people really, no matter what you hear, people want to be masters of their own fate. They want to be able to have a say in what it is they're going to do, and in fact, how they're going to do it. One of the things I certainly agree with you is this notion of why, right? Instead of a manager saying, "Listen, just do that. Just go ahead. Take that. Go over there. Do that." People want to know why it is. Why are you asking me to do that? I like to say we are a why-driven species. We need to know why. How about giving me some ideas from your perspective, Tom, on the importance of.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that most professionals don't want to just be told what to do. They want to understand why. And then often, if we, as companies, if we share with them why we're doing something, and give them some autonomy and communicate so they can provide feedback, they may come up with a better solution on what we ought to be doing to get where we want to go. And I'm just a big believer in sharing as much information as possible, holding people accountable to metrics and targets, but letting them understand why we think those metrics are important, and then listening to their feedback. And maybe we are measuring the wrong things, and maybe we need to measure something a little different. But that type of collaborative environment, I think, not only helps attract and retain the best employees, but often gives the best business outcome as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. I absolutely agree with. One thing let's talk about money. Let's talk about money in this sense. You have a phenomenal background experience in HR. I'm sure you've seen the length and breadth of it all and see it every day today as the VP of HR. Let's tell our listeners and those viewing today, talk about the costs of turnover. What does it cost an organization when they have a rapid a turnover, 20%, 25%? In fact, I'd like you to comment on what you consider to be, if we could do that, if we could generalize it a little bit, what you consider the low turnover to be as opposed to high turnover, maybe some things you've seen in your career. And if you have any stories you would like to add about that, go right ahead.
Absolutely. So a lot of times it depends on the type of position and the industry. Retail workers that are paid 12 or $15 an hour are going to have much higher turnover than, accountants in a corporate office that you're paying much more than that. So it's a little bit relative, but turnover is absolutely very costly. And I worked with a company where I was the head of HR a few years ago, and we had a manufacturing plant. And when I first joined the organization in this manufacturing plant, we were paying really low wages, and the turnover was 60%. The turnover was really high. And we did salary surveys and looked at, what our competitors for that talent base were paying, and they were paying 25% more than what we were paying. And so that was, no matter how good the culture and no matter how much people like their manager, if you are not paying competitively, you're not going to be able to retain that talent. You don't have to pay really high and much better than everybody else, but you need to be in the ballpark. And as we really dug into the reasons of turnover, the first thing we needed to fix was the salary, and we needed to get competitive. And so after we did some work and I went and talked to the CEO and the CFO and said, look, we're going to have to dramatically increase the wage that we're paying. They said, we can't afford to do that. And I said, I don't think you can afford not to, but let me go really quantify the cost of turnover and what it is today and what it's costing us, and then come back with even a more detailed proposal to help you understand what I intuitively knew, but let's go out and look at it. And so I got one of the engineers to really work with me, and we quantified, and there's easy costs to quantify: the cost of recruiting and recruiters if you use them, or advertising. And so there's some easy costs that were easy to quantify. But the two costs that were most significant that we had to go through and quantify was, first, the learning curve. So these manufacturing positions, really, when we got to looking at it, it took 4 months before somebody would be fully productive and proficient in that role. When they first joined, they were maybe 50% of productivity expectations. And then there was a curve, and over 4 months, they would get up to 100%, but it took time. And so the cost of their salary and their wage, discounted due to their low productivity, because they needed to come up the learning curve and learn the processes and how to do their job, was really expensive. And then there was a quality component to that, because they were making more quality mistakes in the manufacturing process than people who had been there for longer than 4 months. And so we quantified all of that, made some projections what we would save by decreasing the turnover from 60% to 10%. and went back and said, we will, and it's counterintuitive to the CEO and CFO, but we will save money if we increase the starting wage
Oh, sure.
by 25%. And we did. That played out, and we got turnover down in the 10% range. And that really played out. And we saved money by getting competitive. And then it uncovered a lot of other issues that we needed to work through to try and get the turnover down. And there were some supervisors and managers that needed some training. There were different communication processes we needed to put in place. There were lots of other things we needed to do to decrease turnover. But being competitive from a compensation perspective was certainly in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That was the first one we needed to take care of.
And the money matters. It's as simple as that. Money matters. But as you pointed out, once you are in the ballpark, once you've compensated people at a level similar to the competitors, let's say, you've given them the necessary health care issues, that those issues are taken care of. It comes down to now what? Now what are you giving them? Have you created an environment, as I like to say, where people come to do their best work every single day? Have you created that environment? But you're right. If the disparage between pay is so enormous, people just say, "Listen, I can't stay here. I've gotta make some money. I've got to pay some bills. I've got to feed my family, whatever." So money matters. It's important, and I appreciate that comment. It's great. Let me talk to you now about employee development. And specifically, you hire an employee. They're working in the company now, let's say 4 or 5 months. What else are we going to do for them, Tom? What are they looking for? And what are you and the HR people going to do to advance them, if you will, or to develop them further?
Yeah, I think that's a question, and it's a structure that I've put in place in numerous places where we need to sit down with the employee, the manager, often an HR person, and the employee, and let's talk about what they aspire to do. There's some employees that want to just come in. They like the job they have. They don't really want to do anything else. They want to be really good at that job, and that's fine. But there's other employees, and probably the majority of employees, that have an aspiration of some kind, that I want to eventually do this. And so helping put together a development plan to understand what they want to do, and then what are the skill sets they need to develop in order to accomplish that. And it's also the flip side where I'm a firm believer in companies need to be proactive and put together a succession plan for all the senior positions and all of the key positions in their organization. And so they also need to be looking at, okay, who aspires to some of these roles but somebody ends up leaving, or we grow and more of those roles are created. Who aspires to those roles? And then who do we need to go talk to and see if we can help them understand the vision of needing to aspire to those roles, because we need to have successors for those key roles. And we need to develop people internally to be able to do that role. You can always go on the outside and recruit, but you know far less about anybody that you're recruiting on the outside than you do about somebody who's worked for you for a year or two or more. And so the mistake rate of putting somebody into a job that they're really not ready for and they're not good at is just much, much less if you develop somebody internally and you put them into different projects or different roles, and you're very confident they can do that next role. You're probably much more accurate in that assessment than when you interview somebody, even in the best selection process in the world, and you're confident that person can do it. You've got much less information to make that assessment on, and the odds of you being right is just less than on the internal candidate that you know is ready for that role.
Oh, I agree. And the costs of recruiting are nullified because you've already got that person. They're here. They're just looking for another place. So let me ask you this question. Let's piggyback on that just for a second. How do you feel about mentoring? What do you think about mentoring? Do you consider it an important thing? And how would you go about doing it?
Yep, absolutely. I think it is important. And I think that training employees on the importance of mentoring and looking for mentors is one successful strategy. And then in many places I've been, we've gone to the point of matching people up and having a formal mentoring program. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but helping to facilitate that is also a strategy that can be successful. But I think that everybody looking to grow in their organization can really benefit from having good mentors and helping people understand that and then training them on what that means. How do you go about looking for mentors, and then vice versa, holding leaders accountable, saying, look, this is important in our organization. We want you to play that role, and we may assign you some mentors, but we also want some of it to come organically as well. And part of what, we hold leaders accountable for is the people that they mentor and those people's success in the organization.
I agree. I think that it's so important to have people who are willing to give of their time and their knowledge and bring other people along, learning leaders, if you want to call them that, who are just so important, who have influence in the organization. Many people might consider them the go-to people. We go to these people. We want to know what's really going on. We trust them, that kind of a thing. Let me ask you this question because I'm very curious about this. Let's talk about training. Let's just talk about training. I can't tell you how many times a day emails come across my desk touting the next online training opportunity or methodology or software or technology. And of course, being old school as I am, I believe you really need to get people in a room together and train them together as a unit, intact. I call it intact group, for example. But yet there's this pressure that online training can take the place of people in a room training together. I'd like to hear some comments from you. How do you feel about that, Tom?
Yeah, I think there's a place for online training. There's a lot of tactical information that sometimes you just need to deliver to people, and the online training and then tests afterward can be a good way to do that. But there's a lot of skills that you just can't learn online. And when you get a group together, a lot of the training comes from people sharing and then developing those relationships where they can lean on each other and bounce ideas and develop some new contacts that even well after the formal training may end, they have these relationships that they can go back and continue to learn from each other and use each other as resources as they go about doing their roles. And so I think it's important to get people together to do that type of formal in-person training for certain.
I absolutely agree. Believe me, believe in online training. I think there's some really valuable, wonderful things that can be done with that and availability. You get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't sleep, you can get online and do some training curricula, if you will. But there's nothing like getting people in a room, sharing the energy, as I like to say, the energy of people together. And I just believe in that. I think you did a good job, really good job in explaining the reason why. Tom, I'm going to ask you the last question and for our get together today. And that's simply this. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it at any issue or problem in the HR world right now, and you could do that, you could wave that magic wand and it would change dramatically or disappear. Is there one thing that comes to mind that you say, you know what, that's the one I'd go after? Why don't you talk to me about that for a minute?
I think one of the biggest challenges for companies is to continue to do a better job around diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
I think that it's not easy to do. Most organizations are not doing a great job at that. And yet, I think we're missing out on a lot of talent and a lot of different perspectives that could really make companies even more successful than they may be today. And so that's the continual problem that I'm not sure I have all the answers for, but something that a lot of organizations are struggling with. And I think if we can figure out how to dramatically improve that, organizations will definitely be more successful.
I agree. I think there's talent. You need to look for talent in a lot of places. And in addition, we go back to this notion of people wanting to be involved in the decision-making processes. And I think that What managers have to understand is they have to open it up, and allow the processes, the decisions, the value of a perspective and an opinion to come in. It just makes the company stronger in the long run. I appreciate it. Listen, Tom, you've been a great guest. I appreciate so much of you being here with me today on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much for your time and effort, and I look forward to talking to you real soon. Have a
Sounds
great
good.
day.
Thanks, John.